Rivard, running for state representative in the 81st district. And the three big things I stand on are education. My mom's a teacher. Public dollars for public schools.
Yeah.
I also want to make sure that there is a mental health counselor in every single school in the state, because we have a massive mental health problem that is not being addressed, and it's possible. I also believe that it's time to protect our unions, to protect even the non-union members, the rights of the workers.
Yep.
Because my dad spent 40 years working his butt off in the auto industry and was thankful enough to have an employer who cared about his employees enough to take the financial hit to make sure he got paid. But when 2007 happened and he had to find a new job, that all went away. So we need to make sure we have at the minimum, specific Michigan labor protection laws going forward. And the last thing is absolutely, obviously, the environment. Because we want to have clean energy, we want to make sure our rivers stay full of fish, our woods are full of deer, our wetlands are full of ducks and geese, because that helps drive our economy, but it can also help bring in other industries, because I can tell you this, I'm a rock climber, I'm a cyclist, I'm a mountain biker, I've done a lot of trail riding, ORV riding. We have an untapped potential that is not being reached in the state, and we need somebody to go in there and be the outdoor recreation advocate to ensure we bring those dollars in, because it also ties into also having healthy communities who are healthy mentally and healthy physically by having clean parks and places just to go for a walk. Thank you. Problems that our veteran community faces is with the mental health issue. This is something specifically, I work in the mental health field as a volunteer and I run a nonprofit. There is this discussion, I think, as a problem of culture as well, is that people feel shame for taking on these social safety nets that we've created. And they feel that asking for help or going out to ask for help for the internal struggles they have is hard, and they shouldn't do it because we tell people, if you're on welfare, you're a freeloader. Nah. These are systems we put in place for these specific reasons. So what we need to do is start changing the conversation around veterans. And there's no shame in having PTSD. There's no shame in being depressed or having agoraphobia and living and being in your room, in your house. Because ultimately what this comes down to is a lot of people are afraid to reach for that help. And so they stay home because they're afraid, and the anxiety takes over. We need to start having the conversations. And obviously, I mentioned the Volunteer Access Network. That can help with that. If you are within the armed services or reserves, or you have a special place in your heart for the veterans, you can go out and help those in your community. And by having that access network, you know who needs the help, you know where they are, and you know how you can specifically help. And on top of it, you get experience that you can take with you to the next job, the next application. Surrounding that for our families, we had a similar conversation. I can only personally really speak to the mental health aspect. Paul, as a veteran, can speak a lot more to the actual functioning of everything. But we need to change the conversation that happens around it, because we are losing veterans every day to suicide. And it's disgusting that we aren't discussing it more, because they went and fought for our freedoms, protected us, and we're thrown into these situations as young men, or even as older men and officers, and trying to come back from that to normal society and function as our own human being is extremely, extremely difficult that we cannot understand. We also need to make sure that we understand that their experience, that their knowledge that they have, and just, even basic organizational systems, as the Army and the Armed Forces are very regimented. These are valuable skills that we need to pick them out, from, like as Kim said, from the back of the line to the front of the line, and say, hey, you have these valuable experiences. We need you to be paying this job as like a manager to help run the store, or anything along those lines. So I think the first step is obviously changing the conversation, and the second step is really reaching out to the communities. And obviously the third step down the line is having legislation that makes sure that things like the VA actually function as intended and are not hamstrung by budget problems. And my girlfriend works in the VA as a psychiatrist, and she will tell you having to deal with the 5 or 6 different computer systems that exist within the VA alone is a nightmare. It is not easy to navigate for a doctor. Imagine how it is for a patient. Thank you. All right. So one of the big problems we had is obviously they said that we didn't have the infrastructure in place. Not physical infrastructure, but that as well. But we didn't have the systems in place to ensure that people could move to this area and thrive in it. And that's one of the reasons they turned us down, because things like, basic public transportation, they said high-speed internet, things like that. And there are things we can do now to ensure that works. So we have the Blue Water Area Transit coming through. We can expand that. We can make sure that we put in place now, it would take us no money to reinstate net neutrality laws for the state of Michigan to ensure these protections. And the thing is, too, is we can bring these corporations all we want. The problem is they're not paying their fair share into it. So what we need to do is be fostering an environment that brings workers in, that wants to bring in high-quality people, and the businesses will follow. people don't follow businesses. Because I work for construction, but if my uncle decided to up and leave and go to Minnesota, I don't care if he's offering me better pay. I want to stay here. I want to stay home. I'm from Algonac. I was born and raised there. I want to stay near the water and go fishing and hunting. So what we need to be doing is we need to be ensuring that we have a strong workforce and also that we have strong labor laws to ensure that these people are coming in. And you see tons of people moving to the Pacific Northwest, and I've been out there and I've talked to people who work there, and they have very basic laws to protect their workers, like making sure that you have your schedule 2 to 3 weeks in advance as a minimum, so you can plan your life around it and plan your other jobs if needed. They also have such basic protections as no-fault firing, where they can't just fire you because you're elderly and you can't keep up with the young folks. That's not fair. So we also need to ensure that we are also protecting our unions, because they are the ones who go to the large corporations and throw down for us and make sure to say that, hey, this is a job, you have people who are willing to work. I have no problem working at a grocery store or as a cashier or as a waiter or anything, as long as I'm being paid fairly for the hard work I'm being put in, and we're not. So that's why we have to ensure that I tell my people who are my generation, join your union. And you can have your problems with the corruption that exists in unions, but the more people you have that go into it, the cleaner they are. They are transparent. They are the ones who are fighting for us. And if you want to make sure that businesses come to Michigan, you have to have a strong workforce to draw the businesses in. And additionally, we have to close the tax loopholes that exist around the corporations, like these things called dark building laws, where, in Algonac we have a CVS pharmacy that pays taxes as if there was nobody working there, despite the lights being on and there's workers there. So these businesses won't leave if we close these loopholes. They'll be finally paying their fair share into the community, because they know that the customer base is here, they know the workers are here. We have to make sure that we have a strong workforce to bring these businesses in.
Okay.
I know I'm not a senior citizen. Clear, I'm one of the youngest people here, but I understand the problems that senior citizens go through, because I know one of the biggest issues is the fixed income. And as somebody who has a relatively very modest income, it's very difficult trying to do things like housing and access to healthcare and all that. And one of the biggest problems is access to that healthcare, because we have an elderly population that lives out in rural areas that doesn't have the direct means to go to a doctor at a drop of a hat, or the ability to, go see a therapist, because we have a large portion of our population suffering from depression and isolation. And what we need to start doing is really reconsidering, first of all, repealing the pension tax that exists, making sure that the retirement that y'all saved up for and earned, you get to keep it, that's yours, you've put your hard work in, it's time for my generation to put the work in next. So we need to start with repealing that tax and making sure that we have equity and we're treating our senior citizens with fairness, but also that we make sure the community is aware of the problems, because people are not aware that depression is rampant in the elderly community. People are not aware that isolation is a problem. And we can solve that. And one of the things I propose is we have a central volunteer access network for the state of Michigan, which includes an easy way for you, regardless if you're in Algonac, Alpena, Marquette, or Macomb, the ability for you to look into your community and say, these are the things that need help. One of them includes, meals, also including just being able to have conversations with your neighbors who may need the extra help, or who are feeling so isolated they probably need somebody to talk to and vent. So the AARP actually just released a big report on it, and I got to read through it, and they basically said that affordability and access to these services is the biggest problem, and we need to start with access first things first. And that's why I propose the volunteer network can help fill in that gap until the state government kicks in, where we need proper funding, and bringing funding back to pre-2007 levels for things like community public health, community mental health, and these public services that all of us rely on. So, does that answer your question?
It does. It comes close. It's just that senior citizens are the largest employee pool next to young people graduating from college. So I want livable wages if I have to go back to work, which is looking like it's going to. It's baby boomer plus. But so you did answer it, and so did Jeremy. Talking about the economy is what I think younger people can do, because they've got the energy,
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, but I live it, and so
Yeah.
I think.
And the thing is, too, we also need to make sure there's equity in hiring practices, because the elderly have a lot more experience, but companies tend to focus on the younger generation because they think they can pay us less, and also because we're young. We need to make sure that when people are applying for jobs, that you're competing against younger people, that we take into account the experience. We don't take into account, the extra cost for health insurance, because that's unfair. It's extremely unfair. So.
Would anyone else